повышению НДС, нет повышению утиль сбора.
The sound you hear is not a cry of hunger. This sound is the voice of a people whose money has been stolen by the state. Now, something is changing in Russia. Because these voices, these communities, are the sound Vladimir Putin has feared most for 20 years. A woman in a pink hat, in that moment when fear gave way to pure anger, shouted the harshest truth that hit Vladimir Putin in the face.
Народ, хватит это терпеть! Нас всех просто грабят!
Today, people in Russia aren't afraid of missiles. People are afraid of the big zero they see when they insert their bank card at the end of the month. And mass protests and worker strikes are resurging against Putin. No salary, no electricity, no heating. Only hunger, minus 20 degrees of cold, and a sense of betrayal remain. Putin was no longer losing the war on the Ukrainian steppes. He was losing it in Russia's kitchens, pockets, and freezing factories. And this uprising is not just the shouting of a group of activists, because at the same time, thousands of kilometers away, completely different protests and mass strike earthquakes are taking place. Today we will show how the Kremlin's lie that everything is under control was shattered by strikes, with footage shot by Russian workers themselves. It all began on a freezing November morning in 2025 in Novosibirsk. Protesting in Russia means risking imprisonment, especially during wartime. But these people have overcome their fear because they have a stronger impulse than fear, the struggle to make ends meet. The woman in the pink hat you see in the video is Elena Yun. She is not a Western agent. She is not a NATO supporter. She is an ordinary Russian citizen. And the truths she shouts in the face of the police are enough to bring down the Kremlin's entire propaganda machine. What do the banners say? Don't let VAT exceed 5%. 70% of our salaries go to taxes. Let's pause and digest that number. 70%. A Russian citizen gives back 70 out of every 100 rubles they earn to the state. Why? Is this money being used to build hospitals, schools, roads, factories? No. This money is being taken to turn into piles of iron that will explode and be destroyed on the Ukrainian steppes. Have you seen Adelina Svishta's analysis? Life is expensive, vegetables are a luxury, and taxes on homes and cars have skyrocketed. The Russian people are being forced to sacrifice their own living standards to finance Putin's personal ambitions. Elena Yun's phrase, "They blinded us," is the symbol of this awakening. The people, lulled for years by tales of Great Russia, opened their eyes to find an empty refrigerator and a tax collector at their door. This is not a simple economic crisis. This is a planned robbery committed by the state against its people. And the people have now made a choice between remaining silent and going hungry. They chose to speak out. If the protest in Novosibirsk was a cry, then the event I'm about to describe is an earthquake. Because this is not just about taxes. This is about Russia's strategic power, its pride, and its most dangerous weapon, nuclear technology. Let's turn our map westward to Dimitrovgrad, known as the Atomic City. This is no ordinary industrial zone. This is the heart of Russia's nuclear future. Project MBIR, that is, the Multi-Purpose Fast Research Reactor. Putin had introduced this project to the world as the revolution of Russian science. The West will envy us, he said. We will lead the world in nuclear energy, he said. But today, the cranes stopped at that construction site. The 300 workers building that revolutionary reactor walked off the job. Why? Because Uralvagonzavod A.Sh., the state-backed company running this massive project, hasn't paid its workers a single ruble since October 2025. August, September, October. 3 months. Easier said than done. For 3 months you work under radioactive risk, in harsh industrial conditions, and you can't bring bread home. Engineers and workers at a nuclear facility going on strike because they are hungry is a collapse alarm for a state. Look at the numbers. The company owes its workers exactly 100 million rubles. This is not a simple apartment building. This is the Russian state's most prestigious project. If Russia cannot pay the wages of the workers employed in its most strategic project, then that state is effectively bankrupt. According to a report in the Kommersant newspaper, the workers are writing letters to the investigative committee. "We are hungry," they say. They stated that they are not only unable to receive their wages, but also their travel expenses and vacation pay. What is the governor doing? He is helpless. What is the mayor doing? He is just listening. Because there is no money. The money is at the front. The money is in those expensive missiles. The money is in the oligarchs' pockets. Think about it. You are one of the world's largest nuclear powers. You claim to be a superpower, but you cannot pay the wages of the man building your most critical nuclear reactor. In their letter to the investigation committee, the workers say that if the Kremlin can't finance this massive 33 billion ruble project, then there are rats in the coffers. And the crisis doesn't end there. Now let's go to the other end of Russia, to Primorskaya in the Far East. The situation at the Primorskaya GRES thermal power plant, the region's largest energy production center, is like something out of a horror movie. If this place stops, factories stop, homes freeze, life ends. Workers aren't working. Workers are lying on the ground. In footage published by RFE/RL, we see power plant workers climbing onto roofs and sleeping on concrete floors. The boilers have cooled down. The turbines have fallen silent. Do you know what their banners say? Strike. This is not a strike. This is a fight for survival. The subcontractors have fled. There is no money. The local population is terrified. What will we do if the electricity is cut off? But the workers, whose wages have not been paid, are threatening to shut down the boilers. This is exactly what we call industrial gangrene. Putin drained the blood of civilian infrastructure to feed his war machine. He cut the maintenance budgets of power plants and diverted them to the war effort. He cut workers' wage funds and diverted them to the army. The result? The body, that is Russia, has begun to lose its vital organs. We are now faced with a state that can no longer produce electricity, complete its nuclear power plant, or take care of its own workers. These images are not exaggerations by Western media. They are distress calls, filmed by Russian workers themselves on their cell phones and shared with the world. And these calls have already begun to shake the walls of the Kremlin. Although the Kremlin media tries to present these events as isolated commercial disputes, the data does not lie. A tax revolt in Novosibirsk, a nuclear strike in Dimitrovgrad, power outages in Primorye. These three events are not independent of each other. They are much more than just local news. Because these strikes and protests are the first bubbles rising to the surface of the deadly suffocation effect created by Russia's war economy. They are proof that the gears of the Russian state mechanism are no longer turning, that the engine is running dry, and that the system is in a state of ruin. The Kremlin is spending billions of rubles a day to sustain the war in Ukraine. Tanks are burning, missiles are exploding, and this enormous cost is creating a hole in the budget that is impossible to close. What is Putin's only solution to plug this hole? Attack the people. So, how is the Kremlin responding to this fire? By denying it? No, they can't even deny it anymore, they admit it, but with fancy words. Have you read Russian Finance Minister Anton Siluanov's latest statements? Siluanov announced that they raised the VAT, value-added tax, from 20% to 22% to close the budget deficit. What is the reason? Financing the special military operation is our priority. In other words, we will take 2% more from your bread, your milk, your diapers, and invest that money in the war. It is better for you to go hungry than for us to lose the war. Now, do you understand why Elena Yun in Novosibirsk shouted, "You're robbing us!" Because Minister Siluanov officially approved this robbery. And on the other side, the woman the West calls Putin's smartest weapon, Elvira Nabiullina, central bank governor. She's also run out of options. What did she say in her interest rate announcement in October? The economy has overheated. We have now reached the limits of our physical production capacity. Nabiullina admits, even if we print money, it won't work, because there are no people left to work. Where are the men? They are either dying on the Ukrainian front, or they have fled the country. Or, like in Dimitrovgrad, they are on strike because they are not getting paid. It's a vicious cycle. The war is consuming the workforce. When the workforce is gone, production stops. When production stops, inflation explodes. When inflation explodes, people take to the streets. Putin is applying more pressure to break this cycle, but the pressure only fuels the anger. Nabiullina's weary expression is not that of an economist, but of a captain who sees the approaching disaster. The ship is sinking, and the lifeboats are already full. Alexandra Prokopenko's analysis from the Carnegie Russia Eurasia Center in Berlin lays out the situation clearly. Putin has the money to finance the war for the next 12 to 14 months, but after that, he will have to make an impossible choice between guns and butter. It seems that Putin has already made that choice. He chose weapons. Butter, meaning the welfare of the people, was taken off the table. This strategic choice has dragged Russia into a two-front war. First front, the trenches in Ukraine against a NATO-backed army. Second front, Russia's own industrial cities against its own working class. The sinking of this ship is not an iceberg accident. It is the result of a deliberate, systematic, and irreversible explosion in the engine room, the heart of the Russian economy. Elena Yun's cry of, "You're robbing us!" in Novosibirsk, or the nuclear workers' question, "Where's my salary?" in Dmitrovgrad, actually point to one terrible truth: the coffers are empty. But how? How did Russia, the energy superpower, end up unable to pay the wages of its own nuclear plant workers? The answer lies in that enormous figure the Kremlin has tried to hide for years, but can no longer sweep under the rug as of autumn 2025. This table you see is the death certificate of Putin's empire dream. Russia's national treasure Gazprom announced a record-clear loss of 629 billion rubles, or approximately $7 billion, for the first time in 22 years. This is not simply a bad financial year. This is industrial cannibalism. The Kremlin has exploited Gazprom so ruthlessly to finance the war that the company is now completely hollowed out. Gazprom is no longer a profitable energy giant. It is a living dead entity dependent on state subsidies. It is an industrial zombie. Behind this bankruptcy lies a much more physical, much more explosive reason. To understand why the money ran out, we need to turn our eyes from bank accounts to oil tanks burning in smoke. Because the coffers weren't just emptied, they were also burned. As of October 2025, the logistics lines that are the lifeblood of the Russian economy fell victim to the most sophisticated logistics stranglehold operation in history. This catastrophe did not happen overnight. It was a surgical process, meticulously orchestrated by Ukrainian intelligence, GUR, aimed at dismantling Russia's fuel lungs. The result? As of October 2025, the toll is horrific. Over 40 key refineries were struck, from Crimea to the Urals. 21% of Russia's total refinery capacity and 40% of its gasoline production have been wiped out. This logistical strangulation has pushed not only factories, but also Putin's most loyal allies, the seemingly untouchable oligarchs, to the brink of ruin. Igor Sechin, Rosneft, and Alexei Miller, Gazprom, once considered the real owners of Russia, are now guardians of tattered wallets. Gazprom's $7 billion loss has evaporated Miller's authority. Sechin, CEO of Rosneft, is helpless because he cannot find spare parts due to Western sanctions and cannot repair his burning refineries. The oligarch's billion-dollar losses are being financed by stealing the last penny from the people's pockets. This is not just an economic crisis, it is a logistical paralysis that is causing tanks on the front lines to run out of fuel. However, the full picture is much darker than Gazprom. The last straw has now fallen, and this straw has fallen on Russia's second energy giant, Lukoil. The terrible rumor circulating loudly in the market is this: Lukoil is facing the threat of nationalization or sale. Lukoil will also be forced to sell its foreign assets in November 2025. Why? Because the Russian energy sector is being crushed under a deadly triple pincer. The West's technology embargo has pushed Russia back to 1980s technology. There are no Western parts, turbines, or software to repair the burning refineries. Rosneft and Lukoil are dependent on China's low-quality copies to repair their damaged facilities, but they are also incompatible. Beijing, which Putin trusted with unlimited friendship, turned its back on Russia as soon as it saw the threat of US secondary sanctions. Chozhou Commercial Bank, ICBC, and other major Chinese banks halted payments to Russia. Russian oil companies cannot collect payment for the oil they sell. Ships are waiting in Chinese ports, but money transfers cannot be made. Friendly China is watching Russia's agony and buying oil at rock-bottom prices, and the more than 40 refinery attacks mentioned above. Under this triple squeeze, figures like Vagit Alekperov, founder of Lukoil, are cornered. The Kremlin plans to rescue these failing giants by nationalizing them, seizing them. But the state's coffers are empty. This is like trying to tie the wreckage of a sinking ship to another sinking ship. It seems that Putin has already made that choice. He chose weapons. Barter, meaning the welfare of the people, is off the table. History teaches us this. A regime can lose the war outside and survive. But when the home front collapses, no army can save that regime. In 1917, it was not the German soldiers at the front that overthrew the Tsar, but the bread queues in St. Petersburg. It was not the war in Afghanistan that destroyed the Soviet Union. It was the empty supermarket shelves and the miners' strikes. Today, history is repeating itself. Those 300 workers in Dimitrovgrad, that woman in the pink hat in Novosibirsk, the electricians lying on the ground in Primoria, they are the first drops of the approaching storm. And the scariest part? This is just the beginning. Winter is only coming. Putin may trust his missiles, he may trust his oligarchs, but he forgets one thing. Even the world's most powerful army cannot stop a hungry people. Russia's home front has collapsed, and when a building starts to crack at its foundation, it doesn't matter how strong the roof is, that building will collapse. And under that rubble will lie those who banned the word recession, not those who shouted the truth. Subscribe, turn on notifications and comment. Do you think the Russian people will quietly endure this winter, or will that woman in the pink hat's cry turn into an avalanche? See you in our next works. Until then, keep your eyes not only on the front lines, but also on Russia's back alleys. The real battle begins there. We will continue to closely monitor this collapse, the moment the engine explodes, and the approaching social storm. To see the truth. Thank you for choosing us.